Hey my friends, is it okay with you if I settle this debate in regards to the Ripple R3 partnership? Is it okay if I settle this right now? We can just put it to rest. Yes, R3 is still working with Ripple. Yes, it's an absolute massive partnership. Yes, R3 still has some XRP, which they were given by Ripple to bring utility to the XRP ledger. Can I settle this for you right now, my friends? So let's listen to the CTO of R3 here. So this is the Chief Technology Officer, Richard Brown of R3, when he's asked about the partnership with Ripple. Shout out to Darren Moore for this one. All right, listen up here, my friends.
You still working with Ripple at all? I know that there was some extracurricular activity that was working its way through the courts, and it's since been resolved. But I'm curious if there's ongoing discussions, since one of their primary focus is on interbank settlement component that you're also touching.
So frankly, Ripple's probably the only topic I just can't talk about. I just don't talk about it. I can't talk about it. I just can't talk about it.
And the genesis for this call, really, you're at least.
So he says Ripple is the only thing I can't talk about. Frankly, Ripple's the only thing I can't talk about. Can you imagine? With everything in the world that you can talk about, Ripple's the only thing he cannot talk about. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? And that was the reason for the call. That's why the interviewer says that was the genesis for the call. Like, that was the main reason for the call. Because this is Chief Technical Officer. The only subject he can't talk about is Ripple. I'm going to show you why. This was recorded a few years ago, and this was right after the lawsuit was settled, I believe. So just so you understand, my friend, and I know many of you understand this and know this, but R3 was given 5 billion XRPs. They had an option to buy 5 billion XRPs at 0.08 of a cent. So it was less than a penny they were going to be able to buy if they met their contract obligation. So they weren't holding their weight, it seems. Ripple sued, they countersued, and then it was settled. So there was a lawsuit going on between them, but it was settled. Now, in my previous video, I believe I made a mistake because I said that I thought the settlement was for 1 billion. That it was not confirmed, but I thought it was for 1 billion XRP, that R3 got to keep 1 billion XRP. But I believe that's incorrect. We were never told exactly the amount or what the settlement was. So right now, R3 is likely still holding 5 billion XRP. Might only be 3, might be 4, might be 5, but that lawsuit was settled. They came to an agreement, they came to an understanding, which I'll show later. So imagine R3 originally was given an amount that's equal to 10% of what's in escrow. There's 50 billion approximately in escrow. So they were given 5 billion, which is equal to 10% of what's in escrow. And it's also equal to 5% of the total supply. Like I said in one of my other videos, guys, with all of the central banks, there's 150 central banks in the world or so, 150 or 200. Bank of England, for example, moves more money in one day than Bitcoin does a whole year. Like, these are massive banks. They literally rule the world. Then you've got the World Bank, you've got the IMF, which is a lender of last resort, which is technically what XRP is actually the SDR for the IMF. I proved that in another video. I'll try to post it right here. If you want to watch probably the most important, significant video ever made on Ripple, I know it sounds crazy, watch this video right here. Hopefully I remember to put it right here. So you've got all the central banks, you've got the IMF, you've got the World Bank, and you've got the DTCC, Depository Trust Corporation Company, that settles approximately, I think it's 3,400 trillion, that's 3.4 quadrillion dollars, I think is what they'll settle this year. Used to be 2,600 trillion, now it's going to be 3,400. With all of these institutions that Ripple could have given these XRPs to as an incentive, they literally gave 5 billion to R3. And some people think that R3 is not going to bring, is not still bringing utility to the XRP ledger, not bringing utility and use cases and demand to XRP. They're not going to use XRP. I'm sorry, but have you lost your mind? Do you think that they're getting 5 billion XRPs for nothing? 5 billion XRPs? 5% of the total supply to one partner? When you have all these different central banks that could have got that 5 billion plus the IMF. So with all due respect, R3 did not get 5 billion for nothing. So I'm going to prove you in this video, the fight is going to stop. People are going to understand that the R3 partnership is absolutely massive. 90% of the banks in the world are connected to R3. They have numerous central bank projects around the world, infrastructure projects, digital blockchain, DLT infrastructure projects, so on and so forth. So just keep that in mind. There's a massive partnership, and I'll show that later on. So again, R3 CTO said the only thing he can't talk about is Ripple. Isn't that interesting? All right, so let's listen here to Gilbert Verdian. You've seen this before from me, but Gilbert Verdian, when referring to the Regulated Liability Network, he said, we also partnered with R3, who is bringing in the shared ledger, where all of the tokenized assets reside. All of them. Gilbert Verdian doesn't say some tokenized assets or most of the tokenized assets. No, he says we partner with R3, who's bringing in the shared ledger, where all of the tokenized assets will reside. So all of the tokenized assets, this means CBDCs as well, because a central bank digital currency, a CBDC, is a tokenized asset. That's what it is. It's a tokenized assets. It's a sovereign currency, a national currency on the blockchain. It's a token on the blockchain. So when he says all of the tokenized assets will reside, Gilbert Verdian here saying that, this includes CBDCs.
In the project, we're bringing a multitude of solutions and technology. This includes enhanced programmability, which is over and above what we've done before in CBDCs and fit for commercial banks, interoperability across networks and different types of DLTs, the interconnectivity of all of these, and then finally, all of this is orchestrated through our technology and presented through a banking-grade API. We're also partnering with R3 on the project, which are bringing in the shared ledger where all the tokenized assets will reside.
So, partnering with R3, we're bringing in the shared ledger where all of the tokenized assets will reside. It talks about the lawsuit, then it says that Ripple then filed a counter lawsuit, reports explained, arguing that the company ended its XRP purchasing contract because R3 failed to deliver on a separate technology partnership that allowed Ripple to access R3's banking network. Ripple's filing wanted the court to rule the contract invalid, report said. So Ripple then filed a counter lawsuit, reports explained, arguing that the company Ripple ended its XRP purchasing contract because R3 failed to deliver on a separate technology partnership. So R3 failed to deliver on a separate technology partnership that allowed Ripple to access R3's banking network. They're referring to R3 Corda here, and they're actually referring to the R3 Corda settler because the R3 Corda settler uses XRP exclusively, maybe XDC possibly, but when it comes to liquidity, it's XRP. I'm going to show that in a minute. So you see here that this was the lawsuit. They're saying they didn't meet their obligation. They're referring to R3 Corda here, Corda settler. And then the lawsuit was settled, and then a few months after, R3 released the R3 Corda settler that uses XRP for settlement. So during the lawsuit, it was SBI Holding, SBI Group, and out of Japan. They own about 90% of the banks in Japan. It seems that it was SBI Group that helped them to come to a conclusion, come to a settlement. SBI is the biggest private shareholder, I believe, of Ripple. They own 10% of Ripple, anyways. And they also own a good part of R3. So right here, look. The SBI Group became the largest outside shareholder and dispatched a director to enhance the partnership. So SBI over 200 companies, regulated authorities, industry organizations from global joins ecosystem. So SBI Group is a major shareholder in R3, and they're also a major shareholder in Ripple. So SBI established SBI Ripple Asia in May 2016 with Ripple, followed by the Japan Bank Consortium together with Japanese financial institutions. So SBI helped them to do the settlement. All right, so look at this real carefully right up here. SBI keynote talks at R3's CordaCon in March 2018. They talked about declaring a full-scale effort to resolving the R3 Ripple legal dispute. And they talked about leverage XRP using Corda. So SBI was going to developing financial services for use with Corda, leveraging XRP using Corda. So a few months after, so September 10th, 2018, settlement announced between R3 and Ripple. Then 3 months later, December 5th, 2018, R3 releases XRP settler that makes full use of XRP ledger. The XRP settler, R3 releases XRP settler that makes full use of XRP ledger. So remember the lawsuit where Ripple says we're going to break the contract, you're not meeting your obligation, you're not bringing the application, the solution that you were supposed to develop that was going to use XRP ledger, haven't brought that to the table yet, whatever, and then it was settled. Now, 3 months after, R3 releases the XRP settler, which makes use of the XRP ledger. So now, all of the banks that are tied to R3 Corda, which is 90%, at the time was 90% of banks. Maybe 98% of them are connected to R3 Corda now. But at the time was 90% of the banks are connected to R3 Corda. R3 is absolutely insanely massive, guys. So now, then, like I said, now every bank that does anything on Corda, which is trade settlement, all these things, can now use XRP for settlement, XRP for liquidity. So December 5th, it was settled. So it's again, R3 releases the XRP settler that makes full use of the XRP ledger. Then a month after, joint venture announced between SBI Holding and R3. And then look at here, right here. R3, this is an SBI group document. So right here it says, this is 2018, guys. You're talking 7 years ago. It was settled. And remember, Gilbert Verdian said we also partnered with R3, who are bringing in the shared ledger where all of the tokenized assets will reside. My friends, I will tell you one thing. You have R3 Corda and you have R3 Corda Settler, which uses the XRP ledger, built on the XRP ledger technically. R3 Corda is not like, you're not going to have all of the tokenized assets in the world reside on R3 Corda. They can only be talking about the XRP ledger here. And I proved that in other documents when I talk about the unified ledger, shared ledger, regulated liability network. It used to be called the regulated internet value. It's all the same thing. You really want to watch my other videos. R3 Ripple solution. So imagine this. Listen to this carefully, guys. This is an SBI document. It's the biggest shareholder of R3 and Ripple. This is what they're saying in 2018. R3 Ripple solution. R3 and Ripple become a global standard for financial operations such as international money transfers and trade finance. R3 Ripple become a global standard for financial operations such as international money transfers and trade finance. And right here you see R3, right here guys, R3, and that R3 Corda, all the solutions built on R3 Corda. There's so many solutions, it's unreal, right? You have real estate, healthcare, you have point, you have repo trading, crowdfunding, cross-border trade, commodity, syndicated loans, global cash management, derivatives, bonds, cryptocurrencies, financial industry, supply chain, all industry. And you see right here, international remittance, Ripple. Look at this document here. The deployment of the Corda settler and its support for XRP as the first settlement mechanism is an important step in showing how the powerful ecosystems cultivated by two of the world's most influential crypto and blockchain communities can work together, said Richard Brown, Chief Technology Officer at R3. While the settler will open. So they're saying the first settlement, they have to say this. They're not going to say it's the only settlement or one of the only settlement. Why would they use anything else? We know that XRP is going to have the most liquidity. It's instant payments. It's almost free. It's decentralized, so on and so forth. They have to give the impression that there might be others in the future. That's how they act. It's always conceptual. We're not sure. We're testing, or, oh, we might only use one. They're never telling you what they're going to do, but they're saying the first settlement here, yeah, it's likely the only one. Maybe XDC is going to use for certain things, but for the main liquidity, cross-border, instant settlement, to go from one, it's XRP ledger. My goodness, it's the XRP ledger. Like I said, they have to say first settlement here, not to make it sound like it's going to be the only one. They can't say that. But here, this is said by Richard Brown, the same guy that at the beginning of my video said, oh, the only thing I can't talk about is Ripple. I can't ask me anything, right? Ask me about my family, ask me personal stuff about very personal questions. I don't want to be rude, so I'm trying to be careful what I say, but it's almost like the guy saying, ask me anything else but Ripple. It's the only thing I can't talk about. It's crazy. Again, this is another announcement where R3 launches universal settler application, facilitate global payments on Corda. To facilitate global payments on Corda. XRP, the first settlement mechanism. This was right on the R3 website. And again, this was in 2018. This is years ago. This is 2 months after the lawsuit was settled. Because again, Ripple said they didn't do their end of the obligation. They didn't produce this new technology that was going to allow Ripple to access all of their banks that R3 uses. So that's what the lawsuit was about. It was settled, and immediately 2 months after, R3 releases R3 Settler. R3 Corda settler. So that's why you're seeing them launching it just after the lawsuit was settled, because many people missed that. So again, this is a document from the IMF. I showed this before. So they're not supposed to let this slip, but whoever was in charge of the editorial publishing, that's supposed to go through all the documents and make sure that nothing slips through the cracks. They forgot to remove this right here. This is IMF document. They're talking about Palau. IMF departmental papers, rise of digital money. And right here, central bank digital currency, crypto assets, and stablecoins. There's a plan to issue sovereign stablecoins by late 2022 based on the R3 XRP blockchain. Isn't that interesting? This is the IMF, my friends. This is the good old IMF. All right? It's not me. This is not just average guy here. This is the IMF calling the R3 the XRP blockchain, or the R3 blockchain. They say it's the R3 XRP blockchain. Isn't that interesting? The IMF, the most powerful institution in the world, says in reference to R3 Corda or the XRP blockchain, calls it the R3 XRP blockchain. Isn't that interesting? Man, I love that. Okay, so this is the same guy, the CTO of R3, is going to tell you that they're going to use XRP for settlement.
And yet, I think it's a really important pattern. The first version we did, and I think it did excite a lot of people. We said, you know what, if we just did it with a traditional bank, maybe it wouldn't be that interesting. So I think we surprised a lot of people, and the first integration we did that I think really captured people's imagination was to say, here's how you can settle if the recipient wants to receive XRP. So we showed how Corda could talk to the XRP network, and we did it on the test network, and we showed how you could send that to the other side and prove that you've done it.
As the beneficiary, Company A can choose the currency in which they'd like to be paid. In this case, Company A chooses XRP. To update the obligation, Company A will get the current exchange rate from an exchange rate oracle, and then update the obligation with the new currency and amount. Having made these changes, Company A obtains a signature from the notary service and distributes the obligation to Company B. Corda Settler also allows users to add additional terms, such as the desired payment address on the XRP network. Company A updates the obligation again and distributes it.
Just real quickly what I showed. Gilbert Verdian, which is working with the Bank for International Settlements, which is the central banks of all central banks, with the innovation hub. Quant Overledger is the solution for the world to adopt blockchain. It is the operating system for the whole world to move to the fourth industrial revolution. We're going from the information age to the fourth industrial age. If you want, you can say revolution or age. Some people say industrial ages, some people say industrial revolution. So Quant Overledger is that solution that allows us to do full use of blockchain, AI, and create multi-chain applications and so on. So they said they partnered with R3, who's bringing in the shared ledger where all of the tokenized assets will reside. So my friends, I have about another 20-25 minutes of explanation. I don't want to make this video about an hour long. It's really too long. So I'm going to do a part 2 for those that are interested in watching it. I'm going to really show you something crazy in part 2. I'll try to release it almost right away. Please like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. But the R3 Ripple partnership is still ongoing. It's massive. And they are using XRP for settlement. In my other video, I'm going to really prove even many more things. You really want to watch part 2 of this R3 Ripple partnership, global dominance. And so again, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate it. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. And I'll see you in the next video, guys. Thank you so much.